This morning we have an amazing story from Muriel Bauer. She has the legacy of an Egyptian mother who taught her how to build resilience in the joy in the face of adversity. Muriel will be sharing her story about her mother's outlook on life, and also lots of traveling stories of her family from Syria, Egypt, Brazil, Holland, Poland, and France. I hope you're ready for this. Over to you, Muriel.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone can help me, can hear me, sorry. My name is, so thank you for having me today on my story. My name is Muriel Bauer, and my talk today is called From Alexandria to the Amazon Forest, How to Celebrate the Legacy of an Egyptian Mother. My mother passed away last January 21st, and at that time, my family and I were living in Singapore. We just moved back to London past September. So not long ago, I called Lindy Levine and I said, Lindy, I would value your advice. My mum passed away and I'm wondering, whether you would have any ideas of how to honor her memory, particularly, in those times of COVID. So Lindy said, tell me about your mum. So I did. She listened very carefully. We had a beautiful and emotional exchange, I must say. And at the end, she said, well, Muriel, I believe you have a story to tell. Why not share it on my story? So here am I today, feeling a bit apprehensive, but I hope you will enjoy all the stories I'm going to share with you. And I hope you can understand also my French accent, so bear with me here. So my talk today will be about the Jews of Alexandria, my mom's family story, and about my dad as well. I will share the unique way my mom viewed life and death, and with a few examples. And finally, we will all go to the Amazon forest to reveal how the trees helped me in my own grieving process this year. So I will share the screen now, and so that we can look at photos together. Okay, so let's get started. Okay. So my mom Fifi was born in 1934 in Alexandria, in Egypt. She was the second of 4 daughters. Her mom, Rachel Levy, came from a long family of Jews in Alexandria. For my grandfather, he was different. His name was Albert Edi, and he was born in Damascus, in Syria. He was the last of 6 kids. When he was 3, both his parents died, and all the siblings decided to immigrate to Brazil to start a new life. So my grandfather became Brazilian, and my mom was telling me he was actually selling newspaper on the beach in Rio to earn a bit of money. In his early 20s, the siblings made a long trip by boat back to the Middle East. And on the way, he stopped in Alexandria. He loved the city and the vibes of that city there, and he decided to stay for a little while. As the story goes, my mom told me that one day he spotted a beautiful woman with long curly hair, and he inquired about her. Upon learning that she was Jewish too, he asked to marry her. So his goal was to take his new bride back to Rio and to join his siblings there. But my grandmother had none of it. She was attached to Egypt and she wouldn't leave. So my grandfather stayed, taught himself Egyptian Arabic and French, and he opened a little textile shop to make a living. So a little bit about the Jews of Alexandria. I looked at the history there, and the presence of Jews dates back from Pharaoh and the Exodus. So for over 3,000 years, there has been Jews in Egypt. In the first half of the 20th century, it is estimated that there were about 80,000 Jews in Egypt and about 25,000 only in Alexandria. Let me show you some pictures about a beautiful shopping road in Alexandria when my mom, in the 30s, when my mom was born, with the famous tramway. I mean, with the opening to the sea, Alexandria was a vibrant, modern, Western style, multicultural city. And walking by the seashore, you would hear many languages: Arabic, Greek, Italian, French, English. My mother's mother tongue was Arabic, and she spoke also fluent French. It was a multi-faith city as well, in the sense that there were Muslims, lots of Jews, Christian Copts, and they seemed to be living in relative harmony and peaceful coexistence. Alexandria was a very modern city. Women were no veil. I mean, you know, there was a lot of dancing and partying. And here you can see a picture of my mom actually at a party when she was probably in her early 20s, looking at us. It was a golden era at the time of the Egyptian movie and music industry. And it seemed to be like a beautiful youth. On this picture, you see a group of friends of my mother, and the two women on the right-hand side are actually her sisters. This is a picture that you can see here of the beach time in Alexandria. I mean, you have to say that, you know, the beautiful sea and the warm weather added to the quality of life there. And there was also a vibrant Jewish community. I managed to get a picture of the synagogue, the famous Eliyahu Hanavi Shul, that was derelict for many years, was recently renovated, and there was a ceremony marking the reopening in February this year. So Jewish life was vibrant. My grandparents kept they were very serious about their faith. They're not necessarily religious, but Judaism was very important to them. I'd like to say two stories about that. You know, that I remember my mom telling me. I mean, she was a really good storyteller. She told me, for instance, that for her, you know, Jews, you were becoming Jew by your father and not your mother. And I have never heard this story ever anywhere else in the world. So that was very surprising to me. And she was also telling me that, you know, Jewish chagim were very important in her family. And at the time, there were obviously no kosher supermarket. So one day, my grandmother bought a goose. And of course, you had 4 little girls in the house, and the goose became the pet. And you had these girls, you know, they were sewing dresses for that goose, making ribbons and hats. And the goose was like a doll. But the day before Pesach, the goose disappeared. My grandmother took it to the shochet, and on the Seder night, she served this amazing goose soup. Needless to say, none of the girls wanted to touch it. So that was a bit of a tragedy. Well, all this beautiful life and carefree spirits sadly changed, as you know. In 1948, you know, there was a creation of the State of Israel, and that turned the tide of this relative coexistence for the Jews living in Arab lands and those living in Egypt. In 1954, General Nasser came to power, and already many Jews were arrested on charges of Zionism and communism. In 1956, you had the Suez Crisis, and thousands of Jews were banished from the city. There is a picture here of the Jews starting to leave that I found on the internet. Nasser's policy of Arab nationalism led to the confiscation of Jewish assets overnight. I mean, my mom was telling me that everything was gone. You know, whatever they owned was confiscated for all members of her family. In 1967, there was a 6-day war, and more confiscations took place. Jews were interned, some killed, some tortured, and there was no other option than to leave. So that resulted in the almost complete disappearance of the 3,000-year-old Jewish community in Egypt. And I mean, it touched my heart just to say that. You know, the vast majority of Jews fled to Israel, Brazil, France, the US, and Argentina. Needless to say, in my family, Pesach had a very special meaning. I mean, we were celebrating 2 Exodus. When we were, you know, praying and saying the words Mimitz Chaim, to go out of Egypt, there was always a very poignant moment around the table. So what does that mean for my family? Well, my grandmother, she was so distressed by all these events that she actually died in 1959. And then the whole family was scattered. It was just blown apart. You know, it was a real tragedy to leave Egypt. 3 of the sisters left. One went to France, one to Israel, and the other emigrated to Canada. My mom stayed with her dad a little longer until it was not possible to stay. And she and her father decided to move to Roanne, which is a city in the center of France, to join her elder sister, who had 3 children then. So they arrived in 1963. My grandfather's dream was to stay there a little and to move back to Rio. It was always his dream to join his siblings. But sadly, he died as well in 1967. My mom was distraught. I mean, there were too many upheavals in a few years. Her 2 parents dying. She was struggling in a new country, new culture, new climate. She was always very cold. She was an orphan. And so she decided to stay in that city in France to be with her sister. So just wanted to show you a picture of my parents taken a few years ago in Singapore. I wanted to say a few words about my dad, because his story is actually quite remarkable as well. I mean, his parents were both Polish, coming from the border between Poland and Ukraine. And they decided to leave Poland in the 30s because they felt, you know, they could see the anti-Semitism rising there. So they moved to Holland. And they came and they became Dutch citizens and worked there. But then again, you know, in 1938, when my dad was born, they saw things not going well for the Jews, so they went to France, hoping they would be better. But when the war broke in September 1939, they were with a 1-year-old baby, and they decided it wasn't safe for them to hide with a baby. So they decided to leave my father with a family of farmers in France. And they went to flee in actually the city called Roanne and to hide there. Sadly, they were denounced and sent to Auschwitz. My grandmother was gassed on arrival, and my grandfather, he spoke 9 languages, and he was a very strong man. So the Germans used him as a slave worker in Auschwitz. Miraculously, he survived. And after the war, he looked for his boy, you know. I mean, imagine the shock for my dad. He's age 7. One day, someone knocks on the door, and you have this very skinny looking man saying, "I'm your dad." I mean, it was a shock. He knew nothing about his real parents, nothing about his Jewish heritage. So my grandfather took him away, and he went to Rouen, where he knew he could find a job in the textile industry. There was a small Jewish community of Holocaust survivors there. By now, I hope you have deducted that Rouen city is indeed the center of the world. So, I mean, imagine these two lonely souls. You know, both my grandfathers died in Rouen actually in 1967, and my parents were both orphans. They met through the local Jewish community, fell in love and married in 1969. And I was born just a few months, 9 months after that. So these two people were the result of the two biggest anti-Semitic forces of the 20th century. They couldn't be more different. It was an incredible meeting of Ashkenazi and Sephardi world. And I came to symbolize it as in my house as the world of books and spices. I mean, my dad was a pure Ashkenazi man. You know, he was a self-taught intellectual. He was collecting books, and he was an expert on the history of the Holocaust, telling me stories every day. My mom, on the contrary, was as colorful as her cookings and her spices. But despite their differences, they were united by a profound generosity, humanity, and an incredible attachment to their Judaism. So I'd like to say a few things about what it means to live in an Egyptian mother. First is food, I have to say. You know, living in France, imagine 40 years ago, there was not much Egyptian or Middle Eastern style cooking, you know, and my house was full of these weird spices and weird dishes. You know, I was brought up with these Arabic words of, you know, that today are part of our daily life, but at the time were very unusual, like, you know, even hummus, tahina, and shakshuka, and fool, all these dishes were unknown. There was one particular dish that I brought here in my picture. This is a soup called molocheia, and this is a very green, gooey soup that is not for the faint-hearted. When I introduced my husband to my mother, she surely made sure that he tested it to know whether he was suitable to marry me. So he passed that test, I have to say. And the other thing that was part of a Jewish Egyptian upbringing was the bagamon, the sheshbesh. And that's the only sport that my mother ever played. And again, my husband learned. He became completely addicted as she was. So he passed brilliantly those two rites of passage, I must say. So, you know, well done. Another thing that is very particular of an Egyptian mother is the love of the Mediterranean Sea. You know, living in France, I never knew there was an Atlantic front ever. You know, every year there was a pilgrimage to the ocean, to the Mediterranean Sea. And it was beautiful, but it was also painful because I could see how she missed it. The other thing that really resonates with me was the way she kept a worldwide web of Egyptian friends all over the world. I mean, it was a time of no internet. Phone calls were very expensive, so I don't know how she did it. But when I was in my 20s, I started backpacking around the world, and I surely tested her Egyptian connections. All these people were my guardian angels. I mean, wherever I would go, be it Moscow, Israel, New York, Athens, everywhere, there was someone waiting for me. And I remember in Montreal one day, I arrived, it was 6 a.m. in the morning in the central bus station. And there was this woman, you know, crossing the hall, shouting, "You must be Fifi's daughter." She had recognized me because we looked like each other. And another little story, one day I was in Prague and on a business trip, and the lobby call said, there's someone for you downstairs. So I went, and there was this man saying, hello, I'm a friend of your mother from Alexandria. Can we have coffee together? So we sat down, and the guy carried this very thick photo album showing me dozens of pictures of my mother. I mean, that's one of them that you saw here today, which I had never seen before. I mean, it was spooky, right? Now I'll move on to share the way my mother saw life, and this is very particular. I mean, this is what stands out for me as her legacy, her values, and her incredible celebration of life. That came through, I would say, three things to me. The first one, Mom had an incredible devotion and passion for children. She had 3 children, I have 3 children, and she became the most incredible grandmother. She was particularly, besotted with babies, because babies symbolize life for her. And, when I took her, we were going together to the playground in Hampstead Heath, she would scan the playground, and after 3 minutes, she would speak to most mothers, whatever the language. And she was there distilling advice on, nutrition, parenting, sleeping patterns, sibling rivalry. She was the universal grandmother. And she was an amazing grandmother to my children. Another thing was her incredible sense of hospitality. Her motto was the more, the merrier. And she used my house to demonstrate that. I remember for Hanukkah, she used to tell me, come on, invite people. I say, sure, I invite people, but how many? It doesn't matter, just invite. I said, but Mom, I only have about 10 chairs in the house. I said, doesn't matter, keep inviting, we'll provide the food. And we had sometime between 80 people inside the house. It was and the more balagan, the better and the happier she was. Another thing was that she taught me when I invited people, or we invited people for the Chagim, she always said, always make sure that you invite people that are not part of the family. First of all, it means you make an extra effort to create a beautiful table. That will avoid conflict, because everybody will be on their best behavior, and you are making a mitzvah. And I have always followed that advice. So altogether, all these were, very Jewish values, and incredible generosity, curiosity about people. She had a genuine interest in everyone, and there were no boundaries. No matter your faith, your culture, your color, your social background, everybody was welcome. My mom spoke Arabic and French, and some Hebrew, Greek, and Italian, and a tiny bit of English. And she always found a way to communicate with strangers. In my neighborhood, she became friends, for instance, with Hassan, a Muslim Kurd, and that is the owner of a local restaurant. And after 20 years, he still remembers my dad and my mom. And, she met in the playground an Italian lady, Francesca, and she brought her home. We are still friends. And obviously there is Yael, who is listening to us today on the call. And she met Yael in the nearby Starbucks. And Yael is a Turkish Jew. And Yael has been my friend for the past 15 years. So, thanks to her, my life was very much enriched. Sorry, here's more story of my mom. As you can see, in her later years, this picture was taken about 2 years ago. So the outlook you have on life is closely connected to the view you have on death. And I will share a little anecdote to illustrate that. One day when I was about 10, I woke up and my parents were having a very bitter argument. So I said, what's going on? And my dad had bought on this, like a magazine, he had bought a sleeping bag. And on the photo, the sleeping bag was, let's say, orange and green. But when he arrived that morning through the post, it was a silky purple inside and black outside. And those were the colors of, funeral in Alexandria. And my mom went completely berserk. It was completely traumatizing for us. She almost threatened my dad for divorce because of that. I mean, it was a big thing. And so much so that we were never allowed, I have a brother and a sister, and none of us were ever allowed to wear black or purple, ever. That did not enter the house. When I was in my 20s, I dared ask for an exemption, which she gave very reluctantly, but I couldn't wear two colors together. So that was the deal. And I understood later why that was so important to her. I mean, when she was, for the first 20 years of her life, she contracted quite a few illnesses that were life-threatening. And she was actually close to dying many times. And doctors came to my grandparents' house on a few nights, and they said, just be prepared. She will not make it through the night. And she did on each occasions. So she was a fighter. She was a warrior when it came to death. And that showed in everything she was doing. Something as well was her age. It was completely forbidden to talk about it. So every time someone was asking her, how old are you? She would say with a twinkle in her eyes, how old do you think I am? And people were saying, well, I don't know. It looks like maybe you're 42 or 53. I said, that's it. You guessed absolutely right. That's exactly the age I am. And she would behave that way. The problem was with her, with us, the children, because when people would randomly ask me, so how old is your mom? I could not answer. So we had to find very elaborate ways of avoiding to answer because we knew it was not allowed to answer. And that was her way, and we respected that. Sadly, when she was in her 60s, she got cancer. And I had just moved to London, and she beat cancer on her own without telling anyone. That was her way of fighting. Only my dad knew, her sister, and she only told her 3 children quite later on. And that was her way of coping. She said, I don't want anyone to know that I am sick. If they don't know, it means I will behave as if I'm healthy. And that's the way I will deal with this. And it worked. She stood up by her principles and got cured. And that was her way. She was fighting. Her philosophy was very clear with this. And when it came to funeral and cemeteries, the same. We were never allowed to go close to any of them. So when I'm happy to say that death was sweet to her. She didn't suffer. She was not ill. She was watching her favorite, TV program. She closed her eyes and she left peacefully. So you might wonder now, what's the connection with the Amazon? As mentioned in my title. So I need to give you a bit of background information here. This is a picture of me on a little plane flying over the Amazon forest. So when I was a teenager, I developed a passion for the Amazon and the preservation of that forest and the indigenous tribes living there. And I have to say I'm a tree hugger. And a few years ago, my counseling practice, my company, started to support a charity called the Pachamama Alliance that acts against logging and fights all extraction in the forest and empowers the tribes there to preserve their culture. So all my life, I dreamt of being there. And my dream came true last year when the Pachamama invited me to take part on a journey there and to live with the Sapara and the Achua tribe. I am a psychotherapist and a nature lover, and I always saw nature and forest as healing agents. Little did I know how powerful this was going to be for me. So what's the connection with my mom? Well, it so happens that she died 7 days before I was going to go on that trip. So obviously, as I arrived in France for the funeral, I canceled my trip to the Amazon. And after the Shiva, my dad actually came to me and he said, you know, I know how important this trip is to you. I believe you should go. It would be good for you. I'll give you my blessing. You should go. So I followed that advice and I went. With hindsight, I can say that the forest looked after me. I mean, the forest is called there the Pachamama, which in Quechua means Mother Earth. And that was indeed quite symbolic. You know, being in a forest for a few weeks, far away from anyone I know, from Western civilization, from electricity, from everything, was a very deep spiritual process. It was a real blessing, and I really felt held in the arms of Mother Earth. I had my little candle with me, and I was saying the Kaddish every morning when the sun was rising. When you arrive in the forest, you have to go to undertake like a cleansing ceremony. So you go through actually like a mikveh, you know, like you go in the water, and the people there, you know, give you some blessings, and they cleanse you from all the energy from the modern world. And after a few days, you start peeling off like an onion. You know, you slowly shed layers of yourself, and until, you know, I managed to access deeper parts of my soul. So I took a lot of time for deep introspection and meditation and reflection to reflect what it meant for me to have lost my mother. This is a photo of the huge kapok tree that is the largest tree in the forest, and it's like that was a very spiritual place to go and pray by this tree. After a few days as well, you know, I realized that my dreams were becoming more vivid, and the Achua people are people of the dream. So every morning they wake up at sunset, and they gather in circles and they share their dreams for guidance. And surely they helped me with this. My mom was very much part of my dreams and visions. She invited herself. I saw her as a young person. I saw her looking after me when I was a little girl. She communicated precious words of wisdom with me. These were rare and rich moments. I could see she was fine wherever she was. So these were moments of healing between her and I that I will cherish forever. I mean, this deep spiritual journey did not lessen the pain of her leaving, but it allowed me to process it in a very unexpected and beautiful way, I must say. I realized that this year has been a year of change and loss in many aspects and for many of us. And I feel blessed to have this opportunity today to bring to life some stories about my family and my mom in particular. So thank you. Thank you very much for listening to me and my stories today. Thank you.
Thank you, Muriel. That was really fascinating, very moving. Very, very interesting. Is your father still in Rouen?
Yes, absolutely.
And there is a Jewish community there.
Yeah, getting smaller. A lot of them went to Israel, but much smaller, but yes, small. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you for listening.
Very, very interesting, fascinating. I could listen all morning. When you were in the Amazon, you didn't get to go to Brazil to see you must have family still there.
Yeah, one day. I hope to go one day. I will fulfill the dream of my grandfather.
Would anybody have a question for Muriel?
I'd like to add one word. I'm Muriel's husband, and so Fifi was my mother-in-law. And I must say there is something which I think is important for all of us. To me, Fifi was the embodiment of Jewish values in everyday life. Just, very simple things like respect for anyone from everywhere, whoever they are. Hospitality, warmth, hope, always hope in any situation. So these are very strong qualities which she displayed, not in a grand, eloquent manner, but in her daily life. And I think this is something I take away from my own life, and I'm sure you can do so as well in your own life. So that's what I wanted to say to honor her soul.
Lindy, is there something you'd like to add to that? You're muted still.
I know. Thank you, Muriel. Thank you for sharing your very, very deep thoughts and feelings, and for giving us all the message that however painful our connections, our deep connections are, we should have the courage to embrace them, to face them, to acknowledge them, and to be enriched by them, and to take them forward. Thank you for your beautiful story.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments?
I have a quick question.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Muriel. It was really, really interesting, particularly the Sephardi side of it. I loved it. But specifically, what is it about Rouen which has attracted so many Jewish families? Because I know Rouen is a big community.
When my mother's sister Lily arrived in Marseille in 56, you had this, civil servants with a long list, and every city in France was giving a quota of the number of Jews or immigrants they would accept. And completely randomly, they were assigned Rouen. So that's the way they end up there. For my paternal grandparents, it was completely by chance again, because Rouen was a city of textile at the time. I mean, it's gone now. And they arrived there hoping that it was in the free zone at the time, and they were hoping that they would be safe there in this small city. They were not, because they were both denounced by their neighbors. But they were hoping that, so both were a bit by chance, actually, and for me, growing up, it was, the minute my parents opened up their mouth and sharing those stories, we were always going all over the world. So it was hard for me to, I was born in France and I was French, but nothing was French in my family story. So sometimes it was not easy to identify to the place where I grew up, I have to say.
Singapore.
Muriel, I have a question. Spotty here.
I have a question.
About the green soup. What are the ingredients?
Sorry, I can't.
So, I have a question, please. It's to do with the grieving process.
Yeah.
Do you think there was something special about the Amazon, or was it simply the fact that you withdrew from everyday life for several weeks to be able to grieve? Yes. In other words,
thank you.
You have to go to the Amazon for that, or can you do it elsewhere?
So no, you don't have to go to the Amazon for that. I mean, I would say you're right in both situations. The sense that I could go on a retreat from everyone else and be by my own was in itself healing, I have to say. But the Amazon added something very specific, because the fact that I spent 3 weeks with the shamans there allowed me to go into certain ceremonies where you have access to deeper parts of your soul, which probably wouldn't have been possible if it were not with these tribes. So I didn't go there for this purpose. It was completely unexpected. But both the raw beauty and of the forest in itself would have been enough. I think that the way the tribes look at dreams and visions definitely allow me to go much deeper, I would say. Yeah.
Did they also have a different attitude to death compared with Western cultures?
100%, for sure, because this is a cycle of life. Everything, life goes into death, that comes back into life. And when you are there, everything is spirit. So they talk to the spirits of people who are gone all the time. And, water is spirit. Every tree, every leaf, the water, the sun, every animal is part of the spirit world. So we human beings are only one part of that big web of life. So when you go there, you become part of something much bigger than yourself. And I think it also allowed me to look at the whole thing in a bigger perspective that maybe would have been possible otherwise. So yeah, that helped me.
Thank you.
Muriel, it's Bobby. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi.
Go ahead,
You
Bobby.
mentioned the green soup. I'd like to know what the ingredients are for the green soup and when can we taste it?
I'll make it for you. I'm happy to invite you all.
Okay. What are the ingredients though?
Well,
Bobby, be careful what you wish for. Okay.
You've already married Muriel, so it's not like me liking it or not liking it is not going to make a difference to me at the moment. But I would love to try it.
Well, I mean, if you go to probably to some Arab shops, actually, you would find the malakheya, and this is a pack, and it's like green leaves, and you create a broth. Usually, it's a chicken broth with lots of coriander and garlic, and you make that broth, and the leaf turn into something very gooey. I mean, yeah. So
okay, I look forward to the invite. Thank you.
Muriel, it's Ruthie. Many happy times with your mum and dad in your house.
True.
Many, many, many happy times. True. Chocolate cake, always. You are the best chocolate cake maker, and I nicked your recipe. But your mum and dad love Singapore. I know how much your mum did as well, and you had 9 years in Singapore. What's the memory from Singapore with your mum?
My parents love the heat. I mean, there are the only people in Singapore that never used air conditioning. I mean, the only ones.
And it's hot.
And it's hot and humid. It's unbearable. So they loved it. And I always made sure in everywhere I took my mom that she could have a view of the sea, because I knew how important it was for her. And also she got connected with the Jewish community of Singapore, which is vibrant and Sephardim in a different way. We're not talking Egypt or North Africa like we have in Europe, but there you have Jews from India, from Iran, Iraq, and even Afghanistan. So this is full of stories that we have never heard before. And it was a very rich, again, in terms of storytelling, my mom loved hearing those stories from Afghani Jews from, you know, Kabul or Calcutta, you know. So my mom loved Singapore, you know, for that, you know, and she managed to find some Egyptian Jews as well, which was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Yes, please do.
Hi, Muriel.
Has a
Now living in.
backgammon. Can you hear me? Just wanted to say that the shul in Singapore.
Sarah wanted to say something. Let's.
Sorry.
Sarah. Sarah, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry. Okay. No, but I can speak after your husband, no? Now?
Go
No,
ahead.
Sarah, please go ahead.
Okay, I go ahead. Okay, I just want to say, first of all, thank you very much for what you express and the feeling I have when I heard that. The story of your mother this is the story of all of us, and it's also the story of me. So it's like it's my story also. I feel like that. So thank you.
She's on the mute again. Sarah, you got mute by Miss. By.
Okay, sorry. So I also wanted to say that I met a few times your mother. I really met her 3 times in Singapore during vacation and few meetings. And I remember her strangely during those small moments. I felt her soul and her light, like she was my family. And I remember with the expression, and I think it's the soul of my grandmother. And she was always nice, and she was like my family. And I really saw her very few times. So I feel all what you said, and I don't know. I feel for you, and I love you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Welcome.
Gillian.
Yes.
Hi. Muriel, just to say thank you very much. What a wonderful tribute to your mum, and that your story really resonated as a real strong Polish Ashkenazi boy marries Alexandrian-born Sephardi. So I really felt your story, and the story continues because there's a joining. But one of my children obviously loved his mother's heritage very much, and he studied Arabic and is fluent in Arabic and in French. So the story does continue. And
Josiane, would you like to say, I know Josiane was in Alexandria for the opening of the shul in Alexandria this year. Maybe you'd like to say a few words about it.
Well, it was extraordinary. It was incredibly moving. There were people who had gathered from all over the world. It was strange times. It was just before COVID. It was extraordinary that we managed to, for that to happen. You can imagine that the authorities were very nervous about this big group of Jews coming to Egypt. We had the most extraordinary treatment. But what was really special was that there was a service. There were 2 rabbis came, one from Israel, one from France. There were a number of people who had been, not only whose parents, I mean, for me, it was my parents were married in that synagogue, but there were people who had themselves prayed in that synagogue. Where possible, we sat in the seats of our parents or their own seats. They still had the brass plates. It was incredibly moving. It's a magnificent synagogue. I mean, you saw the photograph. It's a really, really beautiful building architecturally. yeah, it was something that was very wonderful for everybody. The big question, of course, is what next for that synagogue. I mean, the Egyptian authorities had actually put some money into restoring it, but you know, what next? It will at least stand as a reminder of the Jewish heritage, which is something very, very special. But will it be used for praying? Who knows?
How many Jews are there?
There's 8 or 9. I mean, the community is you know, has gone really, but there are a lot of people who are still very connected to you know, to the cause of keeping that heritage alive, and in particular saving the records, because there's the records of the entire Jewish community kept in that Alexandrian synagogue, and they want to, you know, we want to bring at least a copy of them out. So it's a lovely story, and Muriel, thank you so much, because it was, everything you said was very moving. It was wonderful to hear about your mum. It resonated a lot with me, but your mum was obviously an extraordinary lady, and it must be wonderful for your children to have that heritage and to feel.
They are on the call as well. They are on the call.
Lovely.
Ariel, I think you wanted to say something, Ariel, or?
Ariel, yes.
No, I just wanted to say that the shul in Singapore has a Sheshbesh backgammon tournament. Okay, and my mother-in-law Fifi participated once or twice in this tournament. Of course, she went to the final, and many years later, you know, people were still asking about her, and, you know, when she would come back, because they had, I mean, she rocked the room basically. So she was this kind of energy, you know, that was always, you know, full of life, and so good memories.
Can I just say, Josiane, your comment about the brass names on the seats have caused me to rethink not giving designated seats in South Hampstead, because of course, when we moved to the new shul, we thought, you know, first come, first served, this great egalitarian dream of just come to shul to come to shul. But now I think we have to change, and we have to have the brass plaques on seats. But something tells me that I'll have a battle to fight. But thank you for that, because we see down the eons that perhaps it's something valuable.
Ariel, I think we might have to have a Sheshbesh tournament in our shul in Fifi's name. In the future, when we get back to shul, we're going to have it. We'll have a Sheshbesh championship.
Yes, it was one of the youngish ideas to have a Sheshbesh morning. So I still hope for that very soon.
We will.
We'll have the Fifi Cup.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Molocheia soup.
No. No.
Maybe the soup too. Any last questions for Muriel, because we're nearly at the end now.
Yeah, I want to speak. My name is Vivian. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, Muriel. Muriel. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, fantastic. I just want to share your comment about Hanukkah. I was in this party. You have 10 chairs and she invited 80. The more balagan is more happy. You took me back to my grandmother. She is from Egypt. You know my grandmother from Egypt, but she was from Cairo, from Hart el Yahud. So that's exactly my grandmother. She wasn't care if she have nothing. She wanted everyone to come and join. You make me laugh so loud. And by the way, about the Molochia, I'm going to say I hate it. But my husband who is Ashkenazi, he loves it. He all the time begged for the green soup, but not from me, from my brother who still know how to do it. So thank you for sharing with us. I am anytime remember Fifi, only smile. As you remember, we used to meet by the school gate and always we're laughing about the Mulukhia, about how is in Egypt. It's just lovely to remember. And I always smile. I'm really, she left nice, happy thing on me. And obviously when you spoke about Egypt, it took me back to my grandmother. That's the same story. They moved from France, from Egypt to France. Her brothers learning the Sorbonne. And you know, exactly the same way, the family who come from Egypt. That's exactly the same. But Fifi for me is to smile. And that's what I'm doing whenever anything you spoke about her, I smile. So I don't like Mulukhia, don't offer me, please. But you can invite my husband, Muriel. Thank you. Sorry you cannot see me because I'm not technical. I don't know why no one can see me, but I can see you.
Before anything, Vivian is the security guard at West London Jewish Day School. She was a dear friend of my mom.
Thank you, Muriel, again. Thank you very much.
Linda, did you want something else?
Yeah, I just, good morning, Muriel and Ariel. I mean, you were friends to us and our children grew up together in Northwest Day School. Your mother, as soon as I met her, I connected straight away with her. She was like a mom to me. I'm from Morocco and we're both Sfaradiot. And there was a click.
She's
and
really
I loved her straight away. She was pretty amazing, a strong woman, full of love and open-hearted to everyone. I really miss her, and this what you've done for her is absolutely beautiful. Thank you for sharing this with me and with all of us. Thank you.
Muriel, do you think it's possible that you could share the recipe of for the soup with us?
She never wrote it, but I'll try to see whether.
Okay, if you could share it, we'll get it on the show site. Thank you.
Can I add a word? I'm a close friend of Muriel. Muriel, we are very fortunate to have you. And two thoughts which came from your talk. First, you are very proud of your Ashkenazi and Sephardi heritage. And we are also very lucky that you've got a Sephardi and Ashkenazi heritage because we love good food. We love having a lot of fun together, but we also enjoy our deep discussion. And I think it really comes out of it. And the other thing which comes out of your talk and a lot of what other people say is that there is no boundary between your friends and your family. And I think this is very unique. I mean, not many people bring their parents with their friends together and we party together and we laugh together and we play backgammon together. And that's very, very unique. And it gave us the opportunity to spend some very meaningful and beautiful time with both your parents.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you very much again, Muriel, for a lovely morning. We've all enjoyed it very much indeed. I wish you all a lovely Sunday. All the best.